Imperial Yeast has been up to some really interesting things lately, and they recently announced a product we are super excited about. If you're familiar with Imperial Yeast, you're likely aware of their classification system. A is for ale as an A07 flagship, L is for lager as an L17 harvest, and so on. Well, they recently released the first strain in their I series, which stands for Imperialis and refers to non-GMO hybrids or derivative yeast strains developed by Imperial Yeast that have been honed to exhibit the traits today's brewers most desire. The initial offering, I-22 Capri, is a hybrid of A38 Juice and A43 Loki, two of Imperial's most popular strains for, you guessed it, fruit-forward hazy IPA. Whether you're into this style or just enjoy juicier fermentation characteristics, you have got to give I-22 Capri a shot. Learn more about the Imperialis project and I-22 Capri at imperialyeast.com. There is no denying that brewing and drinking great beer is quite rewarding in and of itself, but I have to imagine most brewers and beer drinkers eventually end up attending various events, whether local or on a bigger scale. Now, in the years that I've been brewing, I've had the opportunity to attend various different types of events, and I'd be lying if I said I haven't developed some opinions based on those experiences. You're listening to the Brewlosophy Podcast. I'm your host, Marshall Schott, and joining me on this Brews Views episode to discuss our opinions about brewing and beer events is contributor Steve Thanos.
I think the whole going out to different events with your homebrew clubs and talking about beer and drinking beer and serving beer has always been something that I've enjoyed. I almost kind of see it as almost a rite of passage for both young homebrewers and old homebrewers like ourselves. And it's always just been something that I've looked forward to.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. From anniversary celebrations at local breweries to international conferences, I've been fortunate enough to attend quite a few brewing and beer events over the years. And I look forward to chatting about that with you today, giving some of our perspectives, sharing some of our opinions on the good, the bad, the ugly, about all of that stuff. Steve, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Now, a little disclaimer that I like to give prior to every Brews Views episode, seeing as this series is specifically intended for us to share our unabashed views on certain topics, we will not be censoring ourselves as much as we usually do. So if certain language is something that bothers you, you may want to pass on this episode. We're not going to be flagrant or intentionally offensive, nothing like that. Just a little bit less filtered than usual. All right, if you're a fan of this show and you'd like to receive a reward for your support, consider becoming a patron of Brewlosophy over at patreon.com/Brewlosophy. By making a small monthly pledge, you'll receive rewards like access to unpublished contributor recipes, unique discounts at YakimaValleyHops.com, and an invite to a monthly live Q&A session with somebody in the brewing world. This month's guest is Jeff Daly, Associate Sensory Scientist at Haas, one of the largest hop companies in the world. Everybody has heard of them. After spending a few years brewing in his garage, Jeff landed a gig with Haas where he helps us all to better understand the characteristics certain hop varieties impart to beer. Trust me, this is going to be a really fun session, especially if you're a hop nerd like us, most of us here at Brewlosophy at least. If you want to be a part of this session, you have to make your pledge at patreon.com/Brewlosophy by July 29th, 2022, as Jeff is going to be taking questions that Saturday, July 30th. All past sessions are available on our private Patreon and Facebook pages, so you can go back and watch them whenever you like. Learn more about becoming a patron over at patreon.com/Brewlosophy. Another really easy way to help us out is by using the links found at brewlosophy.com/support when you're shopping online. Your experience doesn't change a bit, and we get a little kickback for the referral. Really helps us out a ton. And if you wouldn't mind letting us know what you think about this show by leaving a rating and review in Apple Podcast or wherever it is you listen to podcasts, we'd really appreciate it. Feedback is brought to you by Clawhammer Supply, who are known for their incredible all-in-one electric brewing systems. I've had the opportunity to brew on both the 120 and 240 volt systems, and I'm telling you, they are awesome, efficient, easy to use with a relatively small footprint. You will not be disappointed with one of these units, trust me. Plus, the dudes behind the company run a killer YouTube channel, which you can find by searching YouTube for Clawhammer Supply. If you're in the market for electric brewing gear, make sure to check out what Clawhammer Supply has to offer at clawhammersupply.com. And don't forget to let them know Brewlosophy sent you when you're checking out. Again, that's clawhammersupply.com. Alex Shanks Abel wrote in after listening to our experience episode on naming beers, which coincidentally was Steve's idea. So I think this is a good one for you, Steve. Alex said, I know not everyone makes a beer label, just as not everyone makes a name for their beers. But for me, it's just as important to the beer making process as anything. As the saying goes, we first taste with our eyes, and oftentimes drinkers see the label well before they pour a glass glass and see the beer itself. So I like to add a simple story, flavor descriptors, and a small graph of flavors to bias drinkers in my favor. Being good friends with a circle that enjoys beer but doesn't brew or have Untapped, nobody really wants to hear me rant about the exquisite floor malted Maris Otter I used in a dark mild. But if they reach into the fridge and see a beer named Dwarven Ale that says on a label that it's an English cask ale perfect for drinking in a wooden mug in a rowdy tavern on a stormy night, maybe I can get them to care about the story of the beer. And sometimes I'll even change the recipe or the name of a beer to make a label work. For example, my most recent batch was going to be a landlord-inspired bitter named Timothy's Tailor, but I couldn't make a label I liked. While I was messing around in Photoshop, my spouse asked if I heard about the new Star Trek show, so a light bulb went off, and I knew right then the beer was going to be called The Trouble of Fuggles, and had to exclusively feature some U.S. and French Fuggles, and of course the label had to have Captain Kirk and friends overwhelmed by some Fuggles hops.
I love that. When I was bottling prior to joining Brewosophy, I would kind of dabble in the label making for bottles. And then I kind of got away from it just because of the cost that was associated with it. That's the one major drawback. But it is fun to kind of mess around with Photoshop and make those associations and kind of make that story stick with the beer.
Yeah, it's just another layer of I guess like personal, making the beer that you've already, invested so much into, making it more personal, making it more you. Now, first off, I want to give a shout out to Alex for all of the work they've put into building the Brew Club. They're a big part of the leadership team there and doing some really killer stuff. So go check out the Brew Club at thebrewclub.com. That's thebruclub.com to check out all of the stuff that Alex is already investing into that project. Now, I've seen some of Alex's label work, and it really is phenomenal. I mean, we're talking like professional grade stuff. His labels are just so intricate. They were way better than the, I use masking tape with a Sharpie marker to label my bottles back when I was bottle conditioning. I'm not a label dude, obviously. I never have been, but I certainly appreciate that others are really, and really enjoy, that they are. And I really enjoy seeing what people like Alex come up with. So thanks for that feedback, Alex. If you have show feedback, you could send it to feedback@brewlosophy.com or drop us a line on social media. We're going to take a quick break. When we're back, we'll be sharing our unabashed opinions on brewing and beer events. After a long brew day, the last thing I want to do is waste more time chilling wort. I've tried so many different options, and ultimately I settled on the super efficient immersion chillers made by Jaded Brewing. With the King Cobra and Hydra, I'm able to chill my entire batch of wort from boiling to just a few degrees above groundwater temperature in as little as 6 minutes. If an immersion chiller is right for your brewery, then do yourself a favor and check out all of the rad options Jaded Brewing has to offer at jadedbrewing.com. And be sure to let them know Brewlosophy sent you. As every brewer knows, the best beer requires the best hops, which Yakima Valley Hops provides fresh from the source to brewers around the world, carrying everything from classics like Cascade to modern favorites like Galaxy and Mosaic, as well as other ingredients and gear. Yakima Valley Hops has it all. And don't forget to check out their new podcast, The Late Edition, where the YVH crew goes into depth on our favorite plant with industry experts. Head over to YakimaValleyHops.com now to see all they have to offer and subscribe to The Late Edition wherever it is you listen to podcasts. Craftmaster Growlers takes traveling with and sharing beer to a new level. Made from heavy-duty stainless steel, Craftmaster Growlers are double-wall insulated and can keep beer cold for up to 8 hours. Unlike typical growlers, Craftmaster Growlers come with a swiveling tap and fully integrated CO2 regulator cap, allowing beer to stay fresh for 2 weeks or more. The square design takes up less space and will fit in most refrigerator doors, and every Craftmaster Growler comes with a 1-year warranty. There are 64 and 128-ounce versions available over at craftmastergrowlers.com. I've said it many times in the past, as much as I love brewing and drinking beer, what really has kept me doing this thing for as long as I have is the community. In my opinion, there really is no cooler group of people to hang out with than those who share my love of great beer and all that goes into making it. In fact, I would say most of my closest friends these days are people that I've met in brewing or the craft beer community. Now, one of the best ways to engage with this rad community is by attending events, which you and I both have done quite a bit of, Steve. So given given how broad this topic is, I thought we might start this Brews Views episode by going over some of our general opinions related to brewing and beer related events.
Sounds like a plan. Yeah, I mean, for me, it always comes back to community, whether it be the home brewer side or the pro brewer side, or even better, meshing us together. It always seems to go back to community and that sense of belonging, that sense of having a common love for beer and talking about it and just living our lives with it. It's something that I greatly appreciate.
Yeah, I have this weird tendency. I've been told that I'm kind of hyper organized in my thinking. I kind of categorize things in different areas and put them up on the shelf and think about them individually. And so the way I'm breaking this down for this segment, at least, is to talk about my general experiences at beer and brewing related events by what I like, what I don't like, and then what I really, really don't like, or some of the kind of shittier things that I've seen. So to start with the good, because I think that's always a good place to start. Like you said, it's the people. I mean, I love going to these events and meeting up with people who I've talked to online or who I know I just share this passion with. And a while ago there was that term safe space, and I know that the South Park guys did a really funny kind of a play on that with a little.
I saw that
musical.
Yeah.
It was so funny.
Yeah, it was.
But for guys like us, Steve, going to these beer events it sounds nerdy, but it feels safe. And what I mean by that is, that when you start geeking out on beer talk, that you're not going to get eye rolls from across the table. You're going to get people who are like, hell yeah, let's talk about this,
Marshall, are these the same eye rolls I get from my wife when I talk about beer with her?
And the ones that I get from my wife, from most of my neighbors who literally go to sleep if I start to geek out on beer stuff, that's exactly it, Steve.
Okay. Yeah. We're on the same page. Yeah. I mean, it's that like-minded crowd that we're able to talk about beer and not feel guilty, right? About divulging, how much Maris Otter we added to our grits,
exactly.
Or what yeast you want to use, but the homebrew store didn't have it, so you had to sub out something else. And what are your experiences with this Kolsch yeast as opposed to the one that I used? So yeah, it's just being able to have that dialogue openly, like you said, in that safe space.
Yeah.
And not get those eye rolls.
not that I really hate the eye rolls. I can deal with eye rolls, but
I can too.
We've got backbone enough to deal with that. We've been married long enough, Steve. But the ability, there's almost this cathartic release that I experience when I go to these events, and you've got like 10 or 15 people trying one bottle of beer, and it's this tiny sample, and they're all blowing hard about it, and you're like, this is rad. Like, look how cool this can actually be. I'm not the biggest dork in the world for these 3 days.
Right.
So
yeah, exactly. And these events that we're talking about kind of were more popular pre-COVID, and slowly but surely they're coming back now.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you want to make some people happy, throw out an IPA that is really good and really juicy and full of flavor, and you're going to have some people, really happy.
Well, and that hits on another thing that I really love about these events is we've all homebrewers especially, but I'm sure pretty much every brewer on earth, they make a batch of beer, they share it with their mom, and their mom says, you're the best brewer on earth, you should start a brewery. Right. When you go to these events, and maybe this is just my own masochistic, thing. I love going to these events, sharing beers with people, and having them give me honest feedback. And it doesn't mean that they're being a jerk. We've done a whole Brews Views on providing feedback, but to know that, hey, this guy who's one, not only does this person have experience drinking and brewing and understanding the process and what goes into beer and what to look for, but they're also not going to filter themselves as much when they're giving me feedback. And that's the feedback that I actually rely on more than competition score sheets and tips on those, or stuff from my neighbors who just want free beer. It really is. It can be really, I feel like, fulfilling to get that level of feedback from people that you kind of have maybe just an inkling more trust in because of their experience drinking and brewing beer.
Definitely. Like I've been in an event in the past where I brewed up a an all mosaic IPA. And a lot of people, and I don't detect this from drinking beers with mosaic, but a lot of people say that they can detect what's similar to cat piss with mosaic hops. Have you heard that before?
I used to hear it with Simcoe a lot, and I think, I what I've heard with mosaic is diesel fuel or like kerosene. Yeah.
Interesting.
I've never gotten that either. So the people who tasted,
I don't get it. I don't understand it, but he was very cool with how he presented it. And he goes, I think this is a really well-crafted beer, but all I get is cat piss. And we kind of, I knew what he was talking about in the sense that, that is one thing that people tend to pick up with mosaic if you're sensitive to it, I think. But it didn't make me, angry that he was saying that my beer sucked. And quite the opposite. It was like we had that conversation and we were able to talk about what was used and everything. So well, much like you, I appreciate those kind of conversations.
Absolutely. And we kind of hit on it a little earlier. One of the other things that I absolutely love about going to, particularly brewing events, when I say beer events, I'm talking about stuff at like breweries and stuff, or like the Firestone Walker Invitational, stuff like that. Those aren't necessarily brewing events as much as they are what I would refer to as a beer event, but all of them, regardless, when you go to those events, usually there's beers there that you couldn't try otherwise, or they're like new releases or whatever. I absolutely love that piece of it. And I'm one of the few on earth, I imagine, who actually enjoys drinking other people's homemade beer more than I do craft beer. Only because of the creativity that goes into it. And I there's something about knowing this person made this, on their stovetop or in their garage, and it came out like this. Wow. And that to me is so exciting. And so being able to go to these events and have access to these otherwise, untouchable beers, I just think is so fun.
It's like the idea that it's so unique, in the sense that it's not going to be around forever because, that keg is going to kick. And it's kind of like how we felt about beers that were commercial beers that were highly sought out and you really couldn't get it. For me, still today is like Pliny the Elder, Pliny the Younger. Years ago, it was Zombie Dust by Three Floyds. Now I see Zombie Dust on the shelves all the time. So things change over the time. But yeah, it's interesting because it's that fear, I guess maybe the fear of missing out on something that I like with drinking homebrew, because you don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah. Oh, and that's one of the coolest things too, is I was at an event one time where there was this, it was like a booth. It was just a small event in some other city. I wish I could remember what it was called, but I can't. So, but there was this booth of brewers who focused just on sour beers. So this was about 6 or 7 years ago. Yeah. When I feel like the sour beer thing was really kind of blowing up at the time. Yeah. And everything they did, I mean, this place had a massive line, and we're going to talk about that here in a minute, but massive lines. There were like 4 lines, and all of them were like 20 people deep, and they're giving me small samples, and you go in, and I got to the front of the line, and I'm like, okay, I get it. I get why people are waiting in this line. Yeah. These are delicious beers. And then come to find out, and this is the kind of stuff I love, come to find out, every single sour beer they made had a turnaround time of about 4 weeks. So they were doing like kettle souring or whatever, some form of quick souring. And and they were killing it though. And everybody loved these beers. These beers had funky characteristics to them. They tasted like they were aged for a long time, and they were just killing it. And then you get to talk with the brewers because they're home brewers, Exactly. How are you doing this? Like, what's your technique? So you walk away from these events more intelligent, arguably, than when you arrived. And that doesn't happen just by, you can't taste somebody's beer, which to me is kind of proof in their approach. And so being able to taste it, be like, okay, you're more than just a couple words on a Reddit post. This is actually legit stuff. How did you do it? I love that stuff.
Yeah, I do too. It reminds me of an event that I did years ago with my club where we would go to a mushroom picking event. And
magic mushrooms, Steve? Is that what you guys were all tripping balls at the end?
No, it wasn't magic mushrooms. It was Morel Fest.
Okay,
is what it was. And they would go out and forage for morel mushrooms, and They had a beer event with homebrewers serving their beer, and I was serving a friend's cucumber hibiscus sour. Years ago, they were just killing it with making sours, and these were like the old school way of making sours. They take like a year to come up with the right sourness for it, and I decided to kind of play into the whole event, and I made a mushroom rye brown ale that some people were actually interested in. I liked it. I thought it was good. I had a lot of good feedback from it. But yeah, it's stuff like that you're able to either learn from somebody or you're able to teach somebody something about that beer. And that cucumber hibiscus sour did really well in the competition. And we had lines upon lines upon lines serving that beer.
So awesome. God,
yeah, dude, it was so good. It was so ridiculously good.
Well, and that's kind of that feedback piece as well, right? Even if you're behind the booth, behind the taps serving, to see, I mean, there's something validating about hearing that people enjoy the beer that you're making.
Sure.
There's an event I'm going to talk about in the next segment a little bit that I was at, my first time ever attending it here locally. The leadership of the homebrew club at the time, I brought like 2 growlers of a brown ale, which it's actually Brewlosifer's brown ale, because I'm terrible with some names, but it's on the website. You can actually go check it out. It's a relatively simple brown ale that I didn't put too much effort into making, but the whole leadership crew came up to me, this is like 12, 13 years ago, came up to me and was like, who made this? I said, oh, that was mine, man. It was my first time meeting the guys, and they were in love with it. And I was like, wow, it gave me, I liked the beer, but who doesn't like what they make, and to hear that these guys liked it just as much as I do was really, it was encouraging, and again, I just think that part of it is so cool. The other thing that I love about going to these events, and this may sound dorky, but I'm kind of a dorky person, is the entertainment. Usually there's like yard games. If it's a Brewlosophy event, we most of the time have karaoke going. Obviously you're doing bottle shares, beer shares. There's some dancing. There's often bands playing, at least a lot of the events that I go to. And I love that stuff as well. Even beyond the beer and beyond the people, just that environment is something that I really enjoy being around.
Definitely. I can think of different events that we have out here in the Chicago area, and it's always centered around having a really good time. And I'll talk more about some specifics in the next segment. But yeah, out here it's the same thing. People having a good time, having good beer.
Yep. So that's my 3 big ones for what I love about brewing events, brewing and beer events is the people, the beer, and the entertainment. Those are the big things. Now, obviously, nothing is 100% good. I actually don't, in the 15 or so years that I've been doing beer events, going to them, being a part of them, I haven't had too many what I would call just kind of normal bad experiences. We're going to get into some of the shittier stuff here in a sec. But overall, the stuff that I can think of that I'm not the biggest fan of when it comes to these types of things, first off, is a lot of the events that I love the most require me to travel, which means I'm away from my wife and kids, and I like being with my wife and kids. Plus, I have to pay for a flight or for gas to drive there. Right. And so a lot of the, again, there are local events, and I go to a lot of local events, obviously, and those ones don't require much in the way of cost or commute. Though Uber isn't cheap these days anymore, and I'm not going to drive after drinking. That's not something I'm into. But yeah, flying up to Yakima or flying out to, for example, Pittsburgh this year for HomebrewCon. That's just you have to like calculate that into your annual budget, and that can be kind of a detractor for me. And so I kind of consider that one of the not so good aspects of brewing events.
Yeah, I hear you about the time away from family. It is definitely something that if I'm going to go to it, I have to get on the calendar soon so that my family knows about it and we're planning it. Not that they're with me, but they can, understand that I'm not going to be around that day because it is usually a pretty long day. I can remember back when this was more popular, going to events pre-COVID, you would be gone at like 9 a.m. and not get back home until like 6 or 7 o'clock at night.
Right.
So it's a really long chunk of time to be away. So yeah, that is one of the definitely downsides of doing these events.
Yeah, it pulls you away. I mean, and that's just what some, you have to accept it, I suppose. And I think that's an easy one to get past, actually. So when it comes to being at actual events, whether they're local or far away, whatever it might be, there are some things that I think most of us will agree kind of suck about these events, as much as we might like being at them. Again, I'm not trying to poo-poo going to events, and that was not the purpose of this Brews Views. But there are things that I think we might agree aren't so fun. One of them, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, is waiting in lines. I feel like, especially with more beer focused as opposed to brewing focused events, where you're going for, there's a whole bunch of commercial breweries around and they have their booths and they're pouring off of their jockey boxes or whatever. And I often feel like I spend more time waiting in lines than I do just hanging out and drinking beer. And then I think paired with that is the fact that you'll wait 20, 30 minutes in a line, and then you get like 4 ounces of a beer, and it's gone by the time you make it to your next line, basically. And so I kind of sometimes feel like I'm skipping between waits and not really getting as much beer as I'd hope, and that's kind of a bummer for me.
For sure, and even on the flip side of it, being the person that's pouring too, and just having those long lines, and I kind of revert back to my old Starbucks days as a barista, and working the line and making sure that people are not too upset. If we have a lot of people in front of our jockey boxes and trying to get a sample. So yeah, it's always something that is frowned upon with these events, these lines that just grow so quickly.
Well, and then especially when there's like, you mentioned Pliny the Younger, Pliny the Elder. Now that's like, that was like zombie dust here. We now have ample access to it in Fresno. Right. Even I can go to I could go right now and go buy 10 bottles of the stuff. So it's kind of lost that hype appeal. Yeah. But I remember if there was a local event here and somebody drove all the way to Santa Rosa and brought a keg back or something, that was the line. And everybody, of course, wants to drink it, wants to taste it. And you would wait 45 minutes for a 4-ounce pour for what? It's a great double IPA. And I've just found myself skipping out on those lines. I'll let the people who just want to try, I call it the hype train. Literally, like in line is the train. They can have that. I'll just go find something that nobody else is waiting for and drink more of it, I guess.
Same thing. Especially the older that I get now, I'm like, no, I'm not gonna. The curmudgeon in me comes out, and I'm like, no, I'm not sitting in that line. And there's an event that I'll talk about next segment that's has a lot of commercial breweries serving their stuff, and there have been moments where I see the line and like, nope, I'm not going to go in that one yet. And then there's times when the same beer, and they didn't have a line at all. So it's just a matter of, hitting at the right time. Yeah. And just kind of playing your cards right.
And tell me how much it pisses you off when you're waiting in one of those lines. Let's say you're 15, 20 minutes in, there's maybe 5 people ahead of you, and they're pouring, and you hear the worst sound ever to a brewer / craft beer drinker. Yes. Yeah, the kicking of the keg, and you're no, wait, there better be another one. And then the hands go up. Hey guys, we're sorry. We're all out of Pliny the Elder now. And you're like, no, not only did I just waste 20 minutes of my life waiting for, I don't even get to try the damn beer. It's so annoying. And it's happened to all of us, right? God, it pisses me off. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. That's part of the risk, I think, just like standing out in line for a bottle release. And like, oh, sorry, only the first 20 get to come in. Everybody else, see you next time.
Good Lord. I mean, that's an event in and of itself, is bottle releases. I've never gone to one. I refuse to go and wait for a bottle of beer. That is,
the last time I did it was 15 with Goose Island's Bourbon County. Mm-hmm. And that was my last time. Now it's just very small local breweries that I support. I'll go to their releases, and there's maybe like 10 people, 15, 20 people in line. Oh yeah. And that's nothing, that's more me supporting my friends.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, I got a story about bottle releases or a beer release. Before I'd even really known about Pliny the Younger Day and the Russian River doing releasing it on a specific day. This was back in 2011. My wife and I and some friends scheduled a little vacation up in Windsor, California, which is about 20 minutes north of Santa Rosa, which is where Russian River is. They now have actually a brewery in Windsor that I far prefer. Right, yeah, it's amazing. We were there just a few months ago. Phenomenal. Nice. Vinny was there. I got to hang out with him for a little bit. Cool. Yeah, crazy location and just beautiful facility. But anyways, we're there in February, and you know what happens in February? We go down. My friend Chris and I drive down from Windsor to think. We're thinking we'll spend the day, the afternoon at Russian River and just try everything they have on. And as we go down there, we're like, what in the world is this line? It was Pliny the Younger Day, and we no joke, I reset my odometer and drove the length of the line. It was over 2 miles long, and get this, raining. People were out there getting absolutely drenched. In my head, I'm like, you're doing this for a pint, or not even a pint. I think they do 12-ounce pours of a triple IPA. That's how important this is to you. I could not wrap my head around it. And we ended up going to like 4 other local breweries, and we went back to Russian River like 2 days later, and there was no lines. We got to sit where we wanted to sit. It wasn't raining. It was beautiful outside. Nice. So we got the better end of that, in my opinion. But yeah, it just blows me away how committed some people are to trying these things. So
to each their own. I can't argue too much against it, but yeah, I'm with you. I'm not going to sit in line for it. It's just not part of my thing anymore.
Yeah, and that's true. I'm not dissing on the people who do it. I just can't understand it. In the same way that they can't understand why I wouldn't want to do that. I accept that. Maybe it's because I'm not committed enough. Sometimes I feel like that. Like I'm a phony. I'm a phony craft beer guy because I won't wait for 4 hours for a 4-ounce pour. Anyways, as it relates to brewing and beer related events, there are some ugly sides that I've been able to witness. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on this, Steve. Because I've talked to some people who are like, no, I've never seen any shit like that. But man, I'm telling you, when you get a bunch of people together, first off, one of the things that I've noticed, and I don't want to sound like I'm kind of burning, what got us to where we're at with Brewlosophy. That's not my case at all. But if you look at any survey of craft beer drinkers and brewers, they tend to look exactly the same. And that is that it is widely made up, largely made up of middle-aged, white bearded males. and yes. So any event you go to, like that's what you see. And there's just I love culture. I love differences. I love diversity and having different perspectives involved. And so that's always a bummer for me. And I don't know. I'm talking with Julia Hertz, chatting with her about potentially doing a show where we talk a little bit more about diversity in brewing. I don't know what to do to attract people who don't look like me to this hobby or to craft beer in general. Thankfully, what I'm seeing, at least in our data, which we're gonna publish here soon from our survey, is that there are segments of the population that used to be very underrepresented in brewing and such that are less underrepresented now, and I'm really excited about that. I live in an area that is has a real high Hispanic population, and we see a lot of that that segment coming out and drinking and hanging out with us and having a good time. And I just want people to I want people to see this thing as being welcoming and accepting. And I don't know if they do. And I don't know what exactly we can do to make it more open in that respect. And so that's kind of an ugly side of it for me. The other thing, obviously, when you mix a bunch of, middle-aged dudes with beer and alcohol, there's often, you can expect there to be a bit of inebriation and the behaviors that come with that. We've all seen some things go down at events. At least I have, where I'm like, yikes, man. You should probably go to bed, bro.
For sure. Yeah. To kind of jump in with your first comment about the diversity, there was a talk at one of the past homebrew cons, either Minneapolis or Portland. I think it was the Portland one. And Annie Johnson was part of the panel discussion about how to diversify home brewing. So maybe that she would be somebody who we can talk to. She's a good friend of the show, so she could help us out a little bit. I went to their talk just trying. I was president of Pale, the Plainfield Ale and Lager Enthusiasts, my homebrew club, and trying to learn, how can I do it? How can I help diversify this club? Because like we're a bunch of middle-aged white guys who sit around, drink beer, talk about beer. There's other people out there who
Absolutely.
probably want to know about this, but I just don't know where they're at.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to reach out to them.
Yeah.
So I was coming from a very almost helpless stance. Teach me, help me what to do. And so, again, maybe Annie could be someone who can help us with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then your second point about the inebriation, there is I'm not sure if this is like this in California, but is there a certification that you have to be able to serve beer at these events?
I believe there are licenses that you need to get, but I feel like the event can get it. And I think hearing, I actually don't know. I'm not a big organizer of these events. I've never been involved in that, but I think the event has to get like some sort of an approval from the city or whatever it may be.
Gotcha. Okay. Because that is something that is popular out here in Illinois. And now, granted, I don't know how many people are, like looking for it, like, are you certified and whatnot, but that is something that they talk about in these certifications when you're taking the, short class or whatever to get your cert. And they'll talk about, not serving people. And even in the beginning of the events, they'll talk about it briefly.
Yeah.
And it's always just an uncomfortable situation. I'll have it's actually not that ugly. It was more of a funny experience, but I'll talk more about it in the second or the third segment of the show here. It was more of a funny experience. But it was touching on the, excessive drinking part though.
Yeah. And that's what I was going to say is I have no issue with people having a good time. I've been called out, by listeners or people who just follow Brewlosophy, the Brewlosophy website before. I'm not going to condemn somebody for living their life. If you can handle your alcohol and that's the way you do things, I'm all for it. I love going out and getting sloshed every once in a while, but I don't get into fights. My wife has told me that she sometimes struggles to recognize if I'm actually drunk or not sometimes, because I just kind of stay chill. If anything, I get more lovey-dovey and want to laugh and everybody's my best friend, or I'll get up and I dance, and I'm not a good dancer. It's like
that before.
Yeah. Most people, but I was gonna say most people know, if they've been to any events with me, that my thing isn't to offend others or piss people off.
No,
but that's one of the ugly sides of it, is that there are people who you just can't predict how they're gonna take something. And we live in a world now, and I'm not afraid to say it, where some people just, it's like they're looking for the next thing to get offended by. And I feel like sometimes, pull the reins in. Don't come to these events. We were on, I was talking about my local homebrew club. We were on this beer crawl one time, and beer crawls are one of those events that I find absolutely fun. We'll talk about that later. But we're on this beer crawl one time, and there's this one person in the bus who every time anybody said anything, and it wasn't even like risque, just any joke or she found the one, and it could be about anything. We were talking about pizza, and pizza became this thing. Well, if you put pepperoni on your pizza, then it was everything that was said. She got offended by it. And we were like, why did you come? Did you just come here to lecture us the whole time? And it was like, I've been in those situations multiple times. I'm like, what is the deal? Did you think this wasn't going to be like this? It's just a bunch of people drinking, having a good time. Nobody is saying anything to hurt your feelings, or eating pizza to hurt your feelings, or whatever it might be. And that's one of the things that I always, especially with Brewlosophy, I'll admit it, I'm kind of tiptoeing around like, okay, got to make sure that everybody feels that what I said is absolutely safe as possible, right? And that could be a tough thing when you drink and you're inebriated and you like to make people laugh. Now, the other thing is, I'm talking about myself here. I can't tell you how many times I've experienced kind of shitty behavior on the parts of other people who have just taken it too far. A couple of stories that I got here. I was at Homebrew Con. I believe it was the one in Baltimore. So 2016, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm collecting data for an experiment. That's one of the things we like to do at most of the events Brewlosophy attends these days. And so I've got the cups out, and I got like 5 people behind a table. We're all collecting data. The beers were lovingly brewed by Ed Coffee. Just absolutely delicious. And we're having a lot of fun collecting this data. And this guy comes up, and I explained to him, hey, the way that this works, I could tell he had never heard of what, of Brewlosophy or a triangle test, or I don't even know how much beer this guy had drank in his life, because he was sloshed. And it's like 11 o'clock in the morning, right? So I explained to him, he's got these 2 friends with him, and I explained to him, hey, while you're doing this, please don't talk. I can tell that you're a chatty guy. I said, please don't talk. Especially when you're done, don't tell your friends who haven't taken it yet what you thought or, anything about the variable. Just kind of keep it to yourself. And he's like, all right, man, and I serve him up the things, and he looks at him and he goes, I know it's the green one, just by the way they look. And I slammed my hand on the table. I felt like a dad. I slammed my hand on the table and got about 4 inches from his face. And I said, you can go away now. I asked you politely to do this the way that I asked you. Please go away. And he looked like he walked away. I couldn't believe I did it. All the other guys, it was like Malcolm and Ed and some other dudes at the table were like, what the hell did we just witness? And I was like, God, it's guys like that. Like, don't do that. That's so disrespectful to me. And I just that's the kind of stuff that I can't stand. Another thing that I saw, this was at a local festival here in California, and Andy could speak more to it because he was there as well. And we're at this festival and having a great time, and somebody comes running out in one of those like blow up T-Rex costumes. It was really funny. And there's all these home brewing booths around this whole like park. It was just a beautiful event. Everyone's having a great time. And this person comes running out in the T-Rex thing, and people are laughing. And this like bro, looked yoked, probably a football player or something, goes and just tackles this dinosaur to the ground, like nails him like a football player. Lo and behold, it's like this 100-pound female in this the T-Rex costume, totally frail, gets injured because of this guy thinking that he was going to be the funny one. Well, he got walked out. He got kicked out of the event. But seeing that kind of stuff, I'm like, God, dude, what were you thinking? Clearly he wasn't. That's the kind of stuff.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? That's the kind of stuff at these events where I'm just like, good Lord. I mean, you really got to be cautious, I guess, sometimes with people drinking like that.
Yeah. And I think there's always going to be that level of that possibility of something stupid like that happening. But it always does still catch you off guard and kind of by surprise, because you don't expect people to be that obviously stupid.
Good Lord. I know. If you're going to be stupid, at least do something that makes us laugh. And if it's going to hurt somebody, it's you. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Don't go taking out your weird aggression on somebody else. Anyways, right. Those are some of our general opinions on brewing and beer related events. When we're back from this break, I think we'll speak a little bit more directly about our experiences at some of the specific events we've actually attended over the years. There's no denying that stainless steel is the best material for brewing equipment, and Delta Brewing Systems offers some of the lowest prices on high-quality stainless gear, like the Firm Tank, which in addition to holding 8 gallons or 30 liters of work, comes with a domed lid to even further reduce the chances of a messy blow-off. Plus, it can hold up to 4 psi of pressure for closed transfers. Delta Brewing Systems also has their own line of brew kettles, as well as one of the lowest-priced all-in-one electric brewing systems out there, and their prices are shockingly low. If you're in the market for legit stainless gear that won't break the bank, do yourself a favor and head over to deltabrewingsystems.com today. Have you ever thought about adding a port to your kettle but held off because you didn't feel like drilling into your gear or sending it off to have someone else do it? From the makers of the world's fastest counterflow chiller, the Xchillerator, comes the Hangover, the easiest way to add extra ports to your kettle, as well as countless other options. Mount a faucet to your keg for easy portable pouring. Set up the perfect whirlpool arm. Hold a heating element in place. All of this and so much more without permanently modifying your gear. Manufactured right here in the United States, The Hangover offers brewers too many convenient solutions to list here. So head over to Exchillerator.com today to see what The Hangover can do for you. I've attended way too many brewing and beer events to count at this point in my life, and I've definitely developed some opinions on each one of them, as I trust you have as well, Steve. Now, this is this is a 1-ish hour show, so we simply do not have the time to talk about every aspect of every event we've ever gone to. So please be lenient with us on that. We know we're missing things. We know we've done more than what we're going to talk about here. We're just trying to keep this reined in a bit. Steve, I know you're pretty heavily involved with your local brewing scene, so I was thinking maybe we could start there.
Yeah, we have a lot of events that we attend as a club, and one of them is the FOBAB, which is called it's the Festival of Barrel Aged Beers. This is more of a volunteer type of event where we have commercial breweries sampling out their barrel-aged beers. It's usually right around Thanksgiving time, so like the middle of November, and it's always just a really, really good time. Our club so happens to have many people involved in the Illinois Craft Beer Guild, and so they're always involved with the guild. They come back to our club and say, hey, we're looking for volunteers. And so we always volunteer for a session, and then we're able to partake in the festivities in the next session or the session before, the night before, or whatever. So we're quite fortunate enough for that. But for FOBAB, just around trying different barrel aged beers, and being able to see, what people are releasing is always a good time.
Heck, dude, that sounds super fun.
Yeah.
We have my homebrew club here. They just changed their name, in fact, to the Central Valley Warthogs from San Joaquin Warthogs, which I feel like is way more inclusive of the entire Central Valley here. But I'm not nearly as involved these days as I used to be, in part because Brewlosophy keeps me way too busy. And so they'll be scheduling a homebrew club meeting or whatever. I'm like, shoot, I've got to record an episode. I've got to brew a batch of beer. I've got to write this article. Right. Unfortunately for me, I really wish I could be more involved these days. But back in the day when I was involved, the events that we would do, I mentioned the one where some of my closest friends, it was their first time trying a beer I made. It was that brown ale. That event is called Hogtoberfest. And it's usually held at this beautiful estate on the river, about 20 minutes, probably less than that, from my house. And, it's catered, and they got a beer wall that has, I think it's got 12 taps on it, and it's all homebrewed beer. So people are bringing their kegs and connecting it to the beer wall. And you've just got this unlimited supply of unique, fun homebrewed beers. Plus you got bottle shares, you're passing around growlers, and it's the opportunity for those people in the club who don't brew beer but brew other stuff to share their cider, their mead, their kombucha, their sake, actually, and it's awesome. Their wine. I mean, we were at an event one time, and this older guy, I say older, this guy was like in his 80s, comes out with this dusty ass bottle of wine, and we're like, what is this? It was a batch of wine he'd made like 40 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And we're like, what? We get to try. And it was delicious, like that kind of stuff. Awesome. Like, I love it. So I love the homebrew club events. And also the nice thing about local events, whatever that event might be, is that you're now meeting people that you live by, these could be your friends for life. And especially if you share this passion for beer and brewing and such. That's one of the things I really enjoy about these events. Another local event that my club put on, I haven't gone on this in a while, is something I talked about a little earlier as well, are these beer crawls. Basically what they do is they'd say, hey, listen, we got a bus. We can fit like 60 people in the bus. So it's first come, first serve. It's going to cost you like $50 or whatever. And then all of these people show up at a big parking lot, and this bus would drive us about 3.5 hours away. We've done Central Coast, so like Firestone Walker and Barrel House. We've done more like Bay Area stuff, like Faction Brewing, right when Faction was created by Roger, and all of those breweries up there. And you go, and you're not driving anywhere. The biggest responsibility you have, there's two of them. One, you got to make it back to the bus somehow. Two, you got to make sure that bus is clean. So if you're gonna take it a little too far, you got to have a bag or a bucket on you.
Right.
But yeah, they're barring, that one time where that one person just wouldn't stop being offended by the smallest of things. These events have always been so much fun for me. I feel like there's such a space for beer crawls like this where you get enough people together that the cost ends up not being that much.
Yeah, we've explored that as a club. I think some guys have done it before. I never have, just because of time and scheduling and stuff like that, conflicts. But yeah, I've heard they're a lot of fun, and I can see how taking that responsibility away from having to drive and who's the D&D and whatnot.
Yeah.
It helps tremendously.
Yeah. Super fun. Other local stuff that I find myself going to, less on the brewing side, more on the beer, kind of beer event side, are anniversary parties. So a lot of the breweries in town here, I'm friends with the guys who own them and brew at them. And, Crow and Wolf just had an anniversary party. House of Pendragon has one every year since they've opened. It feels so good to go out to these events and knowing that you're supporting not only, this thing that you love, which is craft beer, but also, the guys and girls behind those breweries who built these breweries up, knowing that, hey, I'm out here. And it's often, I have this kind of like love-hate relationship with showing up and seeing the big crowds. I love the fact that they're there giving their money to support these breweries. I can't stand the fact that I have to wait in line for my beer,
right?
But that's just so exactly. You just roll with those punches. And usually, again, I mentioned this before, these anniversary parties almost always are accompanied by a new beer that they're releasing. And I think last year, House of Pendragon, at their anniversary party, they released this double IPA that I'm telling you would rival some of the best, most hyped up double IPAs out there. It was delicious.
That's awesome. Yeah, there's quite a bit of breweries actually just around in where I'm at in Darien, Illinois. There's a good handful. And the trouble with it is that when they start having their anniversary parties, it's like one after the other. And it does kind of take time away from, being with family and whatnot. But definitely fun times though. I know I'll go to, Workforce just had their anniversary party. Not this past weekend, actually. So it's always fun to partake in those special events.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm going to be going out and do a little drinking today at some locals. House of Pendragon, sadly, they're closing up. They're moving out of the tap room that is literally a mile from my house to some other location for various reasons. And so I'm not going to have my little 1 mile walk brewery near me anymore. But I will be going over there because I want to hang out and support the guys as they're prepping for their move.
Right on.
But yeah, it was fun. And this isn't necessarily like a public event, but Tommy Caprellian, the owner of House of Pendragon, head brewer, messages all the friends and is like, well, we're moving. So we need to all get together for old time's sake, do what we used to do 10 years ago, basically. It's it's that kind of stuff where I'm like, God, I love this community so much. Again, the longer crowds at like anniversary party events and such do tend to be kind of a bummer, but I'm just not a big crowd person anyway. So that's kind of my own thing.
It actually reminds me of the event that Workforce threw last year, I believe it was. They Brandon and Amanda Wright, the owners of Workforce, they also had a homebrew shop, which was awesome. And they closed it down last summer, I believe it was. And so they had one final party. They had a big bar in the homebrew shop and everything. So we were able to go in and, just for old time's sake, have an event in there. So it was bittersweet. They're still using the space actually for other things with the brewery itself. They just don't sell the supplies and whatnot. So they made a really what was a horrible thing that had to happen of closing up the brew shop to something that was constructive, and they're using the space still. So if you're in this area, if you still haven't checked out Workforce, it's located in Plainfield, Illinois. It's definitely worth the trip out there.
I've had some Workforce beers, and yeah, man, you're lucky to live near them. Phenomenal. And
definitely.
I remember that event. You were telling me about it. And that's that's kind of the stuff that just shows the generous, amazingly kind side of the, brewing and beer world. And I just love it,
For sure.
So, Steve, I have a question for you. I think I know the answer to this one, but have you had the opportunity to attend any brewing or beer related events internationally?
No, I have not.
So thanks to Brewlosophy, one of the coolest things that's come out of this whole thing for me is that I occasionally will get an invite to go to go talk or whatever, be present at these international brewing events. And one of those was in New Zealand. I think they called it Brewfest or something like that. And it's this 3-day thing, kind of like HomebrewCon, but way different in that the educational components are they're smaller, first off. So you really do have this kind of more personal experience with the person who's doing the talk. I was there with Michael Tonsmeyer and Gordon Strong, that was fun in and of itself, because the three of us kind of palled around together, and our wives would go off and, go to local markets and stuff like that. Cool. But being at these events, for me, what I love about, and I actually, this sounds weird, but I don't know how open the event coordinators internationally would be to this, but I feel like there's a lot of value in people, say from the States or who just aren't from these areas, seeking out and attending these events. Not only do you get awesome travel and to see completely different parts of the world, but you get to experience the brewing culture in a different place. And that has given me massive amounts of perspective. I mean, I can't say this for certain, but I was in New Zealand with Gordon Strong, and we were drinking a bunch of what they were calling back then New Zealand Pilsner, but over there they just called it Pilsner. But it was, they're Pilsners made with New Zealand New World hops that were just characteristically different. Well, now, as everyone knows, the 2021 BJCP guidelines has New Zealand Pilsner in it. Right. Would that have been there had Gordon not done what he did, gone out to this event in New Zealand? I don't know. But I'm certain that the experience that he had there influenced, right, his perspective. Sure. And sure. That it's that kind of stuff where him. Exactly. And we all loved these beers that we're drinking over there in New Zealand. I would never have tried that, or likely wouldn't have drank nearly as much if I'd never gone out there. And so another event that I got to go to was the Homebrew Fest, kind of their version of HomebrewCon in Ireland. And that one I did with Ron Pattinson, and some other folks. And it was, again, just massively perspective, shifting for me to experience the way the brewing culture is in these arguably, particularly for Ireland, these areas where beer and brewing have been around way longer than what we've got here in America, to hear the perspectives, for example, on Guinness, when with Guinness to them is kind of like Budweiser to us, but they all love Guinness. There's nobody over there dissing Guinness. Right. They're proud of it. Whereas we over here, it's fun for us to make fun of BMC, and like all of these things, it's just super cool. And I know that Malcolm got to go down to Brazil and with Brewlosophy, and give a talk, and he got to hang out with John Mallett, and you get to meet these other brewers, these other people in the industry, and it's just really, really neat. Those are some of the most memorable experiences that I've had since being involved in brewing and beer.
Yeah, there's a local guy who is a beer judge for the BJCP, and he actually just got back from South Africa not too long ago, where he was able to judge some beers and stuff like that. But he brought his wife and his daughter along, and I always see stuff that he posts on Facebook for, and it looked like he had a blast. So Yeah, it's amazing what beer can provide for you and opportunities. um, but yeah, I really like the the shift of perspective.
Yeah.
Globally, when you're away from the confines of your safe house and your area, and then go thousands of miles away and see something different for the first time.
Oh, that's just traveling right. Exactly. That's just traveling in general, right? Is seeing different parts of the world. But the fact that you get to attach beer to it, it's just amazing. And the other fun thing, about this goes for any event, but some of the most memorable experiences that I have in my life are the things that went down after the conference was over, or after a talk was given, and that day of the conference is done and over with, and everybody's like, well, what do we do now? Well, there's this local pub down the street. Why don't we go hang out in New Zealand? The final day of the conference, I went out with a whole bunch of conference goers to this one local pub that was known for serving myriad different local craft beers and such. And we're all hanging out on these couches in the back. And there was people who didn't even attend the conference. And I like to chat people up, By the end of the night, I'm standing on a coffee table talking like an American, quote, with the American accent, which they're getting a kick out of. And we're just, and they're like throwing words at me to say. I got schooled on words that you absolutely cannot say in America without getting, punched in the face, that are perfectly appropriate over there. Exactly. My wife's ribbing me like, I swear to God, if you say this when we get home, I'm going to hurt you. But it's like those experiences are what I just pine for. I love it so much. There was one night, I think it was the first night of the conference there. We got to go to a local bar where one of the organizers, Mike Stinger, which I believe today, the day that we're recording, might be his birthday. So happy birthday, Mike. He's in a band. And so we went to this bar and he was playing with his band at this bar that night.
Oh, that's rad.
Yeah, it's so cool. And we got to just hang out. Gordon, Mike, and I are kind of sitting at the bar with our wives, just having this chat like we were hanging out at home. But Mike, the guy who invited us out to this awesome event, is sitting there playing the keyboard with his band, and we got to enjoy the whole thing. It's that kind of stuff that I absolutely love. Now, obviously, living here in the States, 99% of the events that we attend are going to be in the United States. And I think some of the bigger ones we ought to talk about. Obviously, the biggest one is the American Homebrewers Association HomebrewCon, which I know both you and I have attended a few of those.
Yes. It is pretty much the, throw out all your cliches that you want. I'll bite. It's like the Super Bowl for homebrewers, basically, right? And I don't really know if there's a better time for homebrewers to geek out and kind of what we were saying before about this like-mindedness, this ability to kind of this commonality, and you're just walking around the expo center or you're walking around during club night. If people aren't aware of club night, it's when homebrew clubs are able to set up and serve their beer. My homebrew club did it once when we were in Minnesota. We had the Wayne's World theme area, and it was cool. It was just a fun time, and it's still I actually miss it. And so now that things are kind of back to normal now, I'm hoping that I can start attending again.
Yeah. Hey, next year, San Diego, 2023.
Yeah,
man.
I've been talking to my wife about it already, so I think I'm planting the seed. So
yeah, plant that seed and let it grow. You got a whole year. Pittsburgh just ended. I'm with you. We haven't gone in quite a few years, and I have various views on HomebrewCon proper. I love the event. My favorite thing, I mentioned this a while ago, but my favorite thing about attending isn't the organized stuff that's going on at HomebrewCon. It's hanging out with my friends. It's hanging out with the people who I talk to. I mean, that's one of the neatest things about HomebrewCon. Every time I've gone, I've met people who come up and they're like, "Hey, you're Brewlosopher on Reddit or on Homebrew Talk or on Facebook or whatever." Or I've heard your voice on the podcast, and we end up just kind of palling around, having beers together and hanging out. It's just so. Again, I use this word a lot when it comes to community, but it's so fulfilling to have that experience and to meet these people who previously were just words, on a screen, by posting stuff on social media or whatever.
Exactly.
Every homebrew con that I've been to, I've attended the Milk the Funk meetup, which it's that kind of stuff where you're like, damn, I mean, you've got like 40 people, all who are sharing sour and funky beers that they have like passionately crafted on their own, and you are privileged enough to get to try this stuff. I mean, and big, awesome. We're talking Scott Janish and Mike Tonsmeyer and a lot of people, Dan Pixley, all of these people coming with beers that they've brewed, and you just for attending and showing up, get to try this stuff. Right. Super fun. Now, I have to admit, I'm not a big, I don't want this to come across wrong. So Steve, you can slap me on the wrist if I sound a little terse in saying this. Pretty much anything you want to learn about brewing, you can do in about 15 minutes on Google. All of the information is out there. And so I like the educational component to HomebrewCon isn't what attracts me to that event. I think a lot of people like to go, not necessarily for the education they're receiving, but because who's giving that lesson or that talk, they want to see or meet that person or whatever it might be. And I think that's awesome and great. I also think the people who actually get some sort of a education out of these talks, more power to you. But to me, every time I've attended one, I'm like, oh yeah, I Googled that a few weeks ago. Like I already heard that. So there, there's that piece of it to me. I'm the only reason I bring that up is I'm trying not to just sound like we're being only positive and all flowers. There are things about these things that don't necessarily tickle my fancy.
For sure. I mean, there are talks that I would really, really enjoy. And yeah, I think over the years I've just become more, I don't know if critical is the right word, but I look at it with a different lens, and I think, okay, well, I already know about this, so I'd rather go and learn something new about a new strategy or a new way of hopping a beer or something like that that I've never heard of or I know very little of. Because I mean, there's so much information out there. But if you do know somebody who's giving a talk, having that familiar face out in a crowd, I think helps that person. And I always try to remind myself of that, so that it can be maybe a calming effect for them when they're giving that talk. So I can understand.
As somebody who has given talks, I think at every conference I've attended, maybe not one of them, I can tell you that having those familiar faces in the crowd really does ease the nerves. Knowing that if I screw up, you've already seen and heard me screw up a million times makes me feel a lot better. So,
but then again, seeing Jersey's face in the crowd might not help. But to each their own.
True that. Yeah. I will say this, that I mean, we're getting hung up here on HomebrewCon. There's other events we'll talk about, but in terms of the educational stuff, and this goes for other events that I've attended that have an educational component, the ones that I find the most appealing personally are the ones that are interactive. And so by that may mean there's beer being served that you get to talk about, or there's Q&A, so you can ask the person questions. It's more than just a lecture. I mean, I've already gone through 11 years of post high school, college, grad school stuff. Last thing I need is another lecture about something I can find on YouTube, but those more interactive things, I find those so enriching and a lot more fun. I do enjoy walking around the expo at HomebrewCon. You do it once and you want to do it again. That's one of the neat things about that. Plus you get to check out all the cool new shit that people are like creating for brewing and to make your brew day easier, stuff like that. As you mentioned, Club Night is always a blast. I've never had a bad time at Club Night. But mostly I just love hanging out with people. And the nice thing is, at the end of each day of HomebrewCon, there's usually like 15 groups of people going out and doing different things. And you can just tag along. You can just go with them.
Exactly.
We've done all kinds of fun stuff, whether it's just going to grab burgers at a local joint or, going to a karaoke bar, which that's kind of my preference. All kinds of fun stuff. So definitely HomebrewCon is something worth considering going to, I would say, if you're into that style of an event. Another thing the AHA does that I've never actually participated in, but you as the president of your club, I wonder if you guys did, is Big Brew Day.
Oh yeah, definitely. We've had Big Brew Day. We've had Learn to Brew Day. We had an event at Workforce a few years back where one of the reps AHA came out. I think it was Matt Bowling when he was still around with the AHA. He came out and did a fun little get together, and we served beer and stuff like that. And I remember I served I know you'll love this, Marshall, a smoked pumpkin saison, which I'm thinking about bringing back sometime soon. So brew it yourself. I don't know. It might show up somewhere.
Throw some spruce tips in there. You're the spruce tip guy, Steve.
I know. I totally am. My wife hates it. She's like, "You're so obsessed." I'm like, "Yeah, I know." But yeah, I mean, it's always fun. Learn to Brew Day is always fun to get those new brewers out there to kind of show them the ropes. And Big Brew Day, we've done a few times. I know just as recently as this year, it was a bit of a flop with my club, but timing and scheduling is always the thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, the HA does provide plenty of opportunities to get outside of your club meetings and do stuff on the outside.
Yeah, I love Big Brew Day, even though I've never been a part of it. My biggest thing, and again, this is my neuroses, I'm kind of letting everyone in inch by inch on my craziness. The thought of like loading up my brew gear and taking it to a location and then like trying to brew a good batch of beer is crazy. And as neurotic as I am about like, all of this stuff, it just makes me anxious. And so I avoid it, and I'll just go drink at a local brewery on those days.
I have the exact opposite effect on it. Like, I think it's easy. It's like my stuff is so transportable. Now that we're talking about this brings back the memory of 50 Shades of Gorbachev's Birthmark. That's how that beer was created. It was a reiterated mash that I did with the wort that I got from my buddy Ken McMullen, the head brewer at Hopvine Brewing Company out in Aurora, Illinois. I wasn't just satisfied with a simple rye pale ale. I wanted to make it this 10.25% imperial stout, and Gorbachev's Birthmark became, that's how it was born. So I'll never shy away from bringing my gear, and now it's just, do I have the time to do it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I might do it. The other thing is I brew with a 240 volt electric system nowadays. And so I'd have to figure out how to do that. It's just too much. Like, for me to think about that with everything else I've got going on kind of stresses me out.
For sure.
I have said before, I don't want to make any of these other events feel bad. I loved every single one of them. I still love all of them, but I've said before on this show that there's one thing that I've done multiple times, and I'm really excited to get back to doing since COVID is kind of going away, that easily takes the cake for me, and that is going up to Yakima, Washington during hop harvest season. It is that experience for me, and from what I've heard from other people, is so unlike what you get, at least in from my perspective, so unlike what you get at any other brewing and beer event, in part because it includes the kind of beginning aspects of something, and that's hops. You are going out and you are getting your hands in the very stuff that 3-4 months down the line you're going to be brewing beer with, and it is coming from the region where the biggest hop growing region in the world. And to be a part of that, you fly into this little airport in Yakima, you get out of the airplane and it smells like hops. I mean, the whole city just smells like hops. And then you're going to the Yakima Valley Hops hop shop and just hanging out with those guys. They usually have stuff going on. In fact, the prior to COVID at least, and I think they're doing it this year as well, they've got the AHA, and I think they're partnered with Haas or something, doing like hop evaluations, sort of like the Hop Chronicles. And so you've got these big names coming into the hop shop, coming up and drinking beer and evaluating beer, and then sitting down and playing, a round of cornhole after they're done, because that's how Yakima Valley Hops rolls. Is they've got like a big, huge party space with a stage and everything, and all these people just hanging out after drinking beer, and they've got a few beers on tap, homebrewed beers that they made or donated kegs from other local breweries and stuff like that. Then on top of all of that, you're going out to farms and you're rubbing cones fresh off the vine. Then you're going to breweries that are on farms like Balebreaker. They are on Loftus Farms, I believe, using fresh hops. I was out there one year and I got to do hop selection with the folks, the owners and the brewers from Balebreaker Brewing Company. I mean, come on. How cool is that,
Yeah.
And then they took us up to their sensory room and they got us involved in some of their sensory analysis. And we're doing for them what we ask people often to do for us. And then, night comes and you go to the fresh hop party that Yakima Valley Hops puts on, or you go to the fresh hop festival, and you're trying all of these beers made with fresh, oftentimes wet hops that were picked, hours before they brewed the beers with them. You're bumping into people that from huge breweries around the world and getting to talk with them about what they love so much. I mean, everything about it is just so incredibly fun.
I've yet to go to Hop Harvest. It sounds like a blast. It actually reminds me of an invite I just received just last month to attend the open house for Sugar Creek Malt.
Oh yeah,
which is not too far from me, out in not too far from Indianapolis, Indiana. Unfortunately, I was traveling to Ohio to visit my wife's family with my family, so I wasn't able to attend. But it's just an all-day party where they have about 100 beers on tap, about 50 whiskeys that they use their grain to make. Barbecue. There's a big, huge family component. So there's movies later on at night. So it's something that sounds like it would be really rad to attend. Just like Hop Harvest.
That's the thing is there. I was talking with Seth from Mecca Great Estate Malt a couple months ago, and they just had an event that's kind of similar, right? Getting out to, I don't know how else to put it. Our beer starts with farmers, whether you like it or not, whether you're a yeast rancher or, a grain grower or a hop farmer, whatever that may be, you can't make beer without those people. And to be able to get that deep into it, I love that. And maybe there are people out there who wouldn't enjoy it as much as I do. And I know that there are probably some listeners right now thinking, hey, you get to do all of that stuff because, you're a part of Brewlosophy. No, you go to Hop Harvest, all of that stuff is available. You just have to ask, Now, yeah, you're not going to be able to go to, Haas or wherever else and do and engage in a hop selection like a big brewer would, because they're doing that for work. I mean, these people are working and trying to sell stuff, but you go to a farm, if you go you go to CLS Farms or something like that, and you call them up and organize a tour, and you go on a little tour, and then you get to go in and rub cones just like the brewers do, and have that experience. And it's so enriching and so fulfilling and so fun that is without a doubt, that's the one thing that I do everything I can to make it to every single year. And I'm really happy to say that this year it looks like I might be able to make it after 2 years of not going because of the COVID stuff. I'm not entirely sure yet. I will announce it if myself and anyone else from Brewlosophy is able to make it up there this year. But I'm almost certain that 2023 will see Brewlosophy's return to Yakima for Hop Harvest, and we've even started up, talking with our friends from Yakima Valley Hops and Haas about doing a potential collaborative event ourselves that would be more unique than anything I've ever been a part of, and I think it would be a lot of fun for people. So keep your ears open for that. Keep your eyes peeled for posts about that. But it's a lot of fun. And Steve, I really hope you get to make it out to Yakima sometime for Harvest.
I would love to. My wife has been talking about her bucket list of travels and stuff like that, and Washington State is definitely one of them. So I don't know. Maybe we can persuade her. I don't know. But, we'll see.
Hey, a lot of free beer. I mean, that's the other thing about most of these events is the beer tends to be free, right? You pay to get in, and then you get to drink for the most part as much beer as you like. So, well, I hope it's obvious that while we may have some mildly negative opinions about certain brewing and beer events, overall, we both absolutely love attending these things. Again, I know we didn't talk about everything. There are so many things that go on all the time in our local communities and internationally and everywhere else. But we did try to do our best to focus on the stuff that where we've had experience with it. Even if I have to wait in longer lines than usual or deal with obnoxious drunk people, even if I am the obnoxious drunk person, which there are many out there who will likely agree that I have been, I still really enjoy attending all of these events. And I look forward to doing it more as we pull further out of COVID. All right, Steve, did you have any final thoughts you wanted to share about brewing and beer events before we kick this one?
There is one plug that I want to make actually for an event that I've attended and I know of locally. It's in Chicago actually, and that is with the Chaos Homebrew Club, which is a really rad homebrew club. They have their own space in a building in the city, and they have a summer barbecue event every year. This year it's going to be on Saturday, August 20th. I was there last year as a member of Brewlosophy doing triangles, and I'll be out there again this year to do triangle tests. So stop on by, say hi. I'll be there. It's a lot of fun. There's plenty of beer from homebrew clubs. There's different companies, homebrew club or homebrew shops. Even I think the guys from Omega Yeast are there, which is a local yeast place, and overall the event is just top notch. So check that out. It again is Saturday, October 20th. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. And to jump on that, just to kind of a little more broad, when we go to these events and when we do these, we really do try to announce it so that the people who enjoy what it is that we're doing, whether the podcast or the website, are able to come and hang out with us for a little bit. That's what we love. Again, community, drinking good beer, sharing good beer, and being in good company. That is exactly what we like. And also we need your data. So come find us. And we're usually collecting data, whether that's for the Hop Chronicles or Short and Shoddy or our experiment series. Come out and do that. Mike Neville just got to collect all kinds of data from people who were attending HomebrewCon in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and he had a great time hanging out with the folks from Imperial Yeast as well as Yakima Valley Hops, who were generous enough to let him kind of come and chill at their booths for a couple hours each day. So definitely come find us, and we'll definitely try to let you know where we'll be. All right, don't forget to subscribe to the Brew Lab, where host Cade Job takes you into the lab with brewing scientists to discuss research they've performed, and make sure to keep up with all of our beer and brewing antics over at brewlosophy.com. The Brewlosophy podcast is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors, as well as all of our rad listeners. We seriously could not do this without you. Cheers to everyone who has subscribed and left a review of our show. It makes a huge difference. If you haven't yet, please consider doing so. Head over to brewlosophy.com/support to view a list of ways you can easily help us to continue producing this podcast. If you want a reward for your support, visit patreon.com/brewlosophy. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Brewlosophy podcast. Until then, think beer.
Start off the morning with some hot tea, lemon and honey, cause it soothes my throat. Put some herb in the bowl, yeah, it's homegrown. Ain't gotta go through the middleman, no.